I wrote my notes while editing this one, and my notes got lost. Then I tried to reconstruct them and record the jingles I had planned. And then Ardor crashed and all of that got lost. So now I'm angry. It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards vs. Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are talking about Chaos on Catnet by Naomi Kritzer.
The sequel to Catfishing on Catnet.
This is true. A little bit of housekeeping before we jump into it. We've been doing this we're starting on year 3 now, and like many long-standing serial pieces of media, I've decided that it would be best to add continuity at this point. So, faithful listeners will recall that at the end of last episode, I was radicalized by podcasts. And this episode, we see the consequences of that. Or rather, you will... If only we had read this book first, I might have avoided that fate. So what happens in this book? Would you like to do the plot?
I think it's your turn to do the plot.
Okay. So, we rejoin Steph from our previous...
Catnet adventures.
We join Steph, who has now moved to Minneapolis with her mom, although her girlfriend still lives in the small town where the last book took place. She meets a girl at school who has come from a sort of a serious Christian cult, which is based in yet another small Midwestern town.
Like Doomsday Prepper style, serious
right.
Christian cult.
And she is also using a social networking app, which is apparently facilitating her prepper brethren. And it turns out that a lot of Steph's friends are also using social networking apps.
Yes, their own social networking apps.
That are also doing various kinds of social engineering. And whether those things are connected or something, remains to be seen. But the first order of business is rescuing Nell's girlfriend from wherever she's disappeared to. And things proceed from there. I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah, cool. Are there lesbians in this book?
Now we have twice as many lesbians.
Yeah, there are lesbians all over the place in this book, and poly people, and non-binary people, and ace people, and more parts of the LGBTQ rainbow than you can shake a stick at.
Which is actually appropriate because Steph stops going from tiny town to tiny town, and goes to the city, and
yep.
Now there's all sorts of configurations which she may have only seen one at a time in her tiny towns. To be fair, she was introduced. There were non-binary people in the previous book too. Yes,
and although our previous wizard is in jail, we have a new wizard to contend with.
Yes.
So, why should you read it?
I was going to say, this wizard is basically the same kind of wizard as the last one. So if you think that, programmer with unrealistic powers and or superpowered AI count as wizard, then the wizards are even more wizardy.
Sure. Why should you read this book?
I think it's fun. I thought it was a nice, fun... I thought that the thriller bits were actually more successful in this one, even if the premise was possibly a little bit sillier. Possibly a lot sillier.
So I got to say that I disagree. I think this is pretty much worse than the previous book in every respect.
I expected you to say that.
So there you go. As far as getting into the things that I disliked about the first book were pretty much the SF aspects.
And it really leans into those. And I think that the pacing and tension level is a little bit better in this one. But I agree that the SF aspects are it has more of them, and they are sillier.
Again, I disagree, because in the first book, the terror of the dad seemed really real and well realized to me, and this charismatic guy who could fool authority figures, whereas by the time that the stakes and the peril rolled around in the second book, I was too busy thinking about how stupid all of this was.
See, the thing is that for me, I mean, because it took a while to get to the scary part with the dad. And in this one, you know, the big bad is not scary or particularly interesting at all. But but you know, like the scenes where they're trying to get her girlfriend back.
Yeah, no, I will say that, like, I think this book goes off the rails about halfway through. Maybe a little bit more than halfway through. And up until that point, I agree that it was doing a better job with, you know, pacing and rising tension. There's the rising creepiness of what's going on before we actually figure out what's going on is very good. But once we actually figure out what's going on, less good.
It's definitely a book that I've noticed this happens a lot with like thriller type things, especially like science fiction thriller type things, is that I think it's actually really hard to deliver on the creepy tension that, you know, gets promised because our imaginations are scarier.
Yes. So, you know, that's basically it. If you liked the sort of, you know, the drone hacking, you know, robot army parts from the first book and wanted more of that, you'll like this book better, possibly. If you liked the sort of, you know, what's it like being a, you know, queer person in a small town / you know, growing up around bigots, you know, sort of human scale things. This book, like, picks up a lot of those and then kind of doesn't, it kind of veers away from them toward more of the former thing. So you may end up being disappointed if that's what you want. But it's not like there's none of that in here. Right.
And I think, you know, there's not, I definitely agree that it drops a lot of the balls from the first half of the book. But, you know, the stuff that's there in terms of, like, the human relationships, I think is quite good. I think that actually the trying to set, you know, being a kid who's been homeschooled, trying to, you know, settle into, and, like, moving around all the time, trying to settle into a vaguely stationary life, is fairly well depicted. And I just wish that they'd spent more time with that sort. I wish they spent more time with their school in general.
Yeah, no, I think that I probably would have been less impatient with this if I hadn't had my expectations raised by the first book in that respect.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think we both agree on what's going on here and what choices were made, and how you feel about those choices will determine whether you should read this book, basically.
Yep.
Content warnings. Obviously there's the, you know, the conservative Christian prepper cults, kidnapping, acts shooting, of mob violence,
riots.
Yeah, shooting. You know, a lot of, like, bad parents of all shapes and sizes.
All kinds of bad parents. So many bad parents. We get, like, 2 generations of bad moms interacting with each other.
Funny. Yep. And, but no, like, sex assault stuff. I think actually less, you know, actual on-screen violence than in the last book.
I think you're right.
So, anything else to cover before we move on to the spoiler zone?
Nope.
Yep. We spend half an hour complaining about what is a relatively blameless book for kids, and by we, I mean me. So if you don't want to hear it, skip forward to
43 minutes and 46 seconds.
For some praise. So, like, I'm going to skip right ahead to what I think, well, what I think the main...
Do you want to skip straight to the grumpy zone? Is that what you're doing?
I mean, I think, like, my sort of, most of what I have to talk about here is about the last part of the book and the ways in which I was not happy with it. But if you wouldn't want to lead us in a discussion of the better parts, I'm absolutely here for that.
Why don't you get this out of your system first, and then we can talk about some of the better parts.
Okay. So, This book brings up the specter of the Minneapolis riots of the last couple of years, or was it 2 summers ago now? And it does so in what I think is a very clumsy way. Once again, like, the sci-fi setting of these books is just about in the future, but it's not a future that we're actually going to get to, because none of this self-driving car tech and like ubiquitous drone tech actually works and is going to happen, which we discussed in the last episode.
Yes.
But even taking that, there is nothing that is more far-fetched in terms of sci-fi concepts here than the idea that Minneapolis actually passes police reform.
I don't actually hold that against her. I think that one of the things about science fiction is that, and fantasy, is getting to, you get to write the what ifs, and sometimes that's what if all the things that scare me happen, and sometimes it's what if the things that, we know are never going to happen, but we can't help but hope for, what if those happen?
I don't know. I think it does scare her a little bit, the idea of police reform, actually.
The author's dead and all, but the author's note specifically says that she wrote this up as a way of showing, her dream of what, like, good policing could be.
Yes, but she also, that the author is dead. The author's notes were, of course, again, not in the audiobooks. And what we get here is like a big urban riot in Minneapolis, right?
Right.
We get a big urban riot in Minneapolis where both sides are being manipulated by social media into, forgetting their common humanity and attacking each other.
Right.
And, there are noises made about how, well, maybe this isn't all just, sinister hackers turning us against each other. Maybe some of these people are actually evil, but not very many of them. And there's also, they chose to start this in Minneapolis because of the police reforms making it a soft target. It may have been outside the scope of this book to mention why, Minneapolis might have a uniquely reformed police department. But without like the additional context actually in the text, there's a sort of the narrative one is left with is kind of a both sidesism and a kind of a, boy, it's a shame that Russian hackers turned us all against each other that summer.
See, that's really not my takeaway at all for this book, and for those scenes. I mean, my takeaway was, because you've got Steph lost in this horrible riot in Minneapolis, and what you see is that, the police, the police aren't making it worse. They're giving her a voucher for a warm coat. And, I think that if you bring the context of actual riots of, the last 10 years to this book, my takeaway is that you look at this and you go, wow, this would have been so much worse if Minneapolis had a sort of contemporary standard police force.
Well, unfortunately, we only see this from Steph's perspective. And from Steph's perspective, that is a small white teenage girl out in the cold without a coat on, who doesn't appear to be like, a member of any of the particular groups that the police are going to pick on. In fact, she's like the group that the police are most likely to be sympathetic to now. The people of color in this book are, and this sort of was the case in the last book, but you could make but she was in a small town. There was one black family in town,
Right.
But and this is particularly true because of sort of we get the black family who's, fixing up the old, mansion, or the black Iranian multicultural, nerd family. Mm-hmm. It's very clear at this point that the job of characters of color is to help white people who turn up on their doorstep and put them up for the night. That's pretty much what they've done in both books.
But that's not okay. So I agree with you that this book is very much about white people and about a white experience. But I mean, you're forgetting the non-binary who's having trouble actually coming out as non-binary black kid in the first book, for example.
No, that's who I was talking about.
That person, no, they don't put, no, that's Steph's girlfriend's best friend.
Yes, who
They
also
don't put anybody
appears
up.
in this book.
Yes.
Yeah, no, they did. That was the whole.
No, I don't think that Steph's girlfriend's best friend ever like put Steph up in the first book. They're there as just like.
Well, they do in this book, and the point of what I'm saying is that yes, it's a book that's very much about, of what I'm saying is yes, this is a book that's very much about the white experience.
Yes.
In this circumstance, and as such, it treats race riots as sort of fun inspiration for this science fiction idea that they have.
I don't actually think that they're race riots, though.
No. But the inspiration, you're not telling me that this book about sudden violent rioting in Minneapolis with the police culture tie-ins is not referencing or is not in reaction to in some way the Minneapolis riots that happened the year before it was published.
No, it definitely is.
So yes, the book is taking inspiration from race riots where there was a legitimate grievance and being like, let's reimagine this as if a cartoon supervillain who is like a serious cartoon supervillain and very much in the model like of Thanos from the Avengers movies, who has a plan that is like so stupid on the face of it that anybody with well, anyway, we can get into that part later, but it's still like it's appropriating cultural narratives about this event and using them haphazardly in a way that mostly seems to be recapitulating sort of, center-left liberal ideas about why all of that happened. So,
okay, for one thing, I think you've definitely sort of decided that you have your grievance and are going to stick to it. Because yes, it is clearly a response to somebody who I believe the author either lives or used to live in Minneapolis, reacting to something that was happening in her hometown. And she is white, and so it is very much from a white perspective. But the thing is that the social media manipulated riots, that's so much more, that's not just drawing on Minneapolis. That's also drawing on, Charlottesville.
Again, that is something that is entirely full of racial animis.
Yeah, but I think it's reasonable.
Which is completely
to allow a Jewish author to, want to comment on stuff like Charlottesville.
Well, if so, she's doing so without creating there is no textual anti-Semitism or racism in this book. Like the Christian cultists are, again, very poorly drawn, very abstract. They're not given any motivation that is any deeper than a movie catchphrase, either mask on or mask off. So if you want to add an actual moral dimension to this, you're going to need that isn't just boy, isn't it scary how the internet can manipulate us into hating each other. If you're going to actually say, oh, these people who have a long-standing, ambition to further the cause of white supremacy are using this for their own purposes, you need to do more than just throw away I guess some people are actually bad, sentence, which is what we get.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is also somewhat the limitation of writing a book from the perspective of teenagers, and teenagers who aren't particularly aware of the world around them.
I mean, sure, absolutely. But I feel like, so here's the missed opportunity for me, right? In broader strokes. If we had spent more time with Nell, if we had spent more time with Nell's girlfriend, and that's the thing that really disappointed me. Is
that's a real lost opportunity. It's
I could, again, same as the first book, I could have thrown all the AI stuff out the window. That's the least interesting part of this because it's completely unrealistic. And doesn't really even match up particularly well metaphorically to anything that's real. But if we could have maybe found out a little bit what it felt like for Glennis, to be thrown in that shed.
Yeah.
If we could maybe have spent a little bit more time with the abiding remnant and figured out what they actually believe and what's actually pushing them to do this, not just, oh, my mom's crazy, and my mom's a bigot. We don't get any of her backstory. We don't get anything besides these people are Christian fundamentalist bigots.
Yes.
And they're bad, and they're willing to kill me. Like Glennis's, like the only thing that we get from Glennis's mom is that her parents are willing to starve her in a shed and they're willing to murder her. And like the thing about the last book is that we got, we understood where Steph's mom came from, So we got this nice complicated portrait of why Steph's mom was both like abusive and abusive for good reasons. Mm-hmm. And even if like Nell's and Glennis's parents are going to be abusive for awful reasons, which is probably the case, I would have liked at least something, because that to me is far more interesting than where the book actually went. And, that's just me. But if you're going to go into sort of Robot Wars mode, I don't like the sort of haphazardly taking, real world socioeconomic stuff, not connecting it to anything, sort of riffing on it as background for your AI story. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is somebody trying to write about the town that they live in, and specifically, trying to think, what if the public safety rethinking that, was going on while she was writing the book actually happened and happened right? And maybe that's the thing where maybe if you want to write a weird science fiction story, you don't want to set it in your actual town, because it is too easy to bring like all of your own biases into the process without noticing. But I did not find, I thought that the villain stuff was stupid, but, I did not find it deeply objectionable that somebody wants to write, science fiction about where they live. And even with all of the, like, blinders that they have, being a white person in a segregated city.
Yeah, I should be clear here. I'm not trying to say that the author is a bad person.
Oh, well, that's not the point.
Right, exactly. We
don't morally judge the authors except when they're Marion Zimmer Bradley.
Yeah, and I'm not, and again, like, I don't, as we keep saying, the author is dead. I don't care that this author is from Minneapolis. Like,
but the thing is that you do care because you're specifically tying it into, like, you're specifically tying
people
into
outside
your
Minneapolis
experience
also,
of the news. Right, but the thing is that people inside Minneapolis are going to have a different perspective.
Okay.
None
of the characters in this book are from Minneapolis either. So, there's that. So, I mean, if you want to discount the, the sort of authorial ghost, this is still mostly people from outside the city, and really from outside any city, reacting to the scary things that come from living in a city, without talking about race or about structural poverty or
to some degree, the thing is that if you take the standard narrative and you have two white teenagers from small towns coming into the city and there's scary stuff, like either you can elide race because you want to talk about other things, and yes, you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities, or your main characters are going to be racist, and you can't really sell YA these days when your main characters are racist, even if you want a nuanced exploration of how that could come to be.
I mean, that's fair. And, I'm sure that's the reality of the situation, and I'm sure that there was a reason why we couldn't get too far into the Nell and Glennis side of things.
Well, I think you could get into the Nell and Glennis side of things. I feel like that you're sort of rolling all of your complaints into one here.
Okay,
Because, like, I agree with you that we should have gotten more from Nell's point of view, and we should have gotten something from Glennis's point of view. That would have definitely stayed within the remit of YA, keeping all the perspectives as, you know, teenagers, or AIs that are basically teenagers. And it would have, and, you know, it would have been, like, Glennis definitely is kind of a MacGuffin. She doesn't have a lot of agency of her own, and that's a real disappointment in the book.
Okay. I mean, all right. I don't think that I shouldn't have rolled those two things together, but I think, honestly, I think that focusing more on who Nell and Glennis are actually likely to be might have helped solve some of my other criticisms. Because, like, what do you do? Like, Nell and Glennis were brought up in a prepper, you know, all whites, except for Brother Malachi, who I'm assuming is not white, even though it's not mentioned. Apocalyptic Christian cult. Now, being brought up in that environment is going to come with certain, you know, traits, you know, and, like, we get the part of it that has to do with being gay, you know, hammered.
Right.
Because that's what's, you know, relevant to this book's message. This is incidentally also a book with very few good men in it, much like the original. But
the best you've got is Nell's terrible father, who, you know, by the end recognizes that he has been a terrible father and is half-assedly committed to doing better.
Yeah. Whereas
mostly because his girlfriends have, like, shamed him into it.
Whereas Steph's awful grandmother gets a lot more, you know, gets a lot more credit and a lot more narrative love, despite, as far as I can tell, also being kind of awful.
Yeah, no. I mean, part of this is the YA, like, all adults are awful thing.
Yeah. But
also, you're right that, like, the awful women and the awful female parents in this get way more nuance and narrative love than the awful male parents.
I also, yeah. I don't know why I was reminded of this all of a sudden, but it's like, oh, we better go and seek shelter in the house with the rainbow flag in it. I hope it's not the one that Katrina went to. Anyway.
Right.
That was a Light from Uncommon Stars reference. But you still shouldn't judge people by their lawn signs. I once tried to go into a house that said all are welcome on the doormat, and they called the cops. The thing is that there are some teenage naive things in this book that seem to be, you know, treated completely at face value by the world that they're living in.
Yeah.
But what I was saying basically was that if you let Nell and Glennis be, you know, like, people who have been steeped in this culture their entire lives, and, you know, they're rebelling against it because they're gay.
Right.
But that doesn't automatically fix everything else, you know?
Yeah. No, and that's a really good point. And, you know, and I mean, for that matter, like, Steph has been going from small town to small town, and we don't really see, and, you know, she's not dealing with any real culture shock. And I mean, it's not even just, like, racial issues. It's also just the culture shock of being somewhere where there's tons of people everywhere.
Yeah. Like, part of this is explained by the fact that that Steph at least has been part of this, part of Catnet.
Yeah.
Which has like the sort of multicultural orthodoxy, you know, baked into it.
Yes.
As a lot of,
because it was assembled by a good liberal AI.
Exactly. And as you know, and to be fair, this is baked into a lot of online spaces where young people are, if they're, you know, gay or you know, there are of course a lot of online spaces for young people which do the exact opposite, as we see with the catacombs. But, you know, again, Nell and Glennis should have you know, inculcated that kind of stuff into more aspects of their being. And, you know, I understand that there's only so much that a one book can do. But again, it's really just deciding to elide all of that, but still pulling on these real world tangents that have undeniable racial and class characteristics that get to me.
Yeah, and I think that's a totally fair criticism. It's and I think that is a better criticism than just, how dare this talk about riots in Minneapolis, but not have it be the exact dynamics of the previous riots in Minneapolis.
Yeah, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. It's more that I want to hear about some of the things,
Yeah,
because if you don't know, and you look at this book, which is, I mean, and the sort of the major, like, sort of, I don't want to say scaremongering, but the major thing that this book is warning you about is being radicalized on the internet. I want a little bit more, both sides are the same and they're actually being run by the same people in order to turn us against each other, which is sort of kind of the line about how Trump got elected.
I mean, to be fair, there was like specific Russian disinformation stuff specifically to radicalize both the left and the right.
Yes, that is true.
So, I mean, like, that part, it's the fact that it's one supervillain man as opposed to, like an organization or a hostile foreign power that makes it ridiculous.
That's where the AI comes in, I guess. Yeah, but I mean, let's talk about. I do want to say about Rajiv, right? So he's an accelerationist out of central casting.
Yes.
We get much less time with him than we did with Steph's dad.
Yeah, and honestly, as far as race stuff goes, I actually think that was, that's not well handled. The fact that this is like it definitely feels clumsy that this is a brown man doing all of this. In a way, like, in that he sounds just like every white accelerationist on the internet, and there's no real reflection of what it would be like to be somebody steeped in that ideology, but not white.
This book has a kind of lawn sign approach to diversity, in that mostly it changes people's skin color without addressing anything else about them. Yeah, I mean, but also, what we know his name is Rajiv. We don't know literally anything else about him.
Well, we know he's part of the same. He's part of the same Silicon Valley coding group that Steph's parents were.
He was a Silicon Valley college radical, and we know that he's less good at what he does than any of the other people in the group, which makes me think that he's like an Osama bin Laden, like, fail son type. Who, somebody who was like came from a rich family somewhere in the Middle East or India, probably India, and was radicalized in the West, and was radicalized somewhere along the way because he wasn't actually able to, continue the family business in any meaningful way. But I'm making that up because I wasn't given any information.
Making that up. Like, it's also, the thing is that you could totally just, make him Randy from Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And, and like your standard white upper class kid went to Stanford or Berkeley or wherever it was that they all met. Is good enough at computer programming to join the startup, but, not quite good enough to keep up with all the people around him, and gets sort of bitter and angry.
Yeah, that seems more realistic to me, frankly. Like, if you listen to people who espouse, like, vaguely the kind of ideology that he espouses, although, again, even the dumber people on the internet have at least a slightly more realistic grasp on this stuff than he seems to.
Mm-hmm.
God, really, the thing that annoyed me about him the most was the lack of imagination. Honestly, it's like, surely if you wanted to be an accelerationist, you could have come up with a better way to do it than making teens fight in urban centers. Like,
well, teens and adult, like it's teens and adults. We just mostly see the
Right.
teens because that's Steph and her friends. But we see that like there's the pretty good scene where Steph goes to the party for the Christians via their app, and they plant a tracking device on her, and her mother's like, "How could you be such an idiot?" But
Yeah.
But like that was all. But those are all adults.
Yeah. And the bombing that we see is clearly done by a grown person, not by
Right.
you know.
And all the all the cultists we see who aren't Nell and Glennis are adults.
Yes.
So it's teens and adults, but like, so I mean, I agree. Like, Rajiv is just a terrible character. Like, he's not a good character. He's not.
He's not a character. He's
not a character, and he's not a good shadowy villain because, I mean, you're right that if you want to tie this to contemporary stuff, he shouldn't just be one guy, and. But at the same time, that particular mix of ego and utter lack of creative imagination is real common in Silicon Valley.
I suppose that's true. I mean, as a radicalized person, he disappoints me. Like, he could have done so much better, and more interesting things with this destructive impulses that he had.
I think that part of the thing is that the people who end up doing that generally are the people who lack enough imagination to have a more nuanced approach.
I know. That's exactly what I'm always talking about. Like, mass shooters never go to the right place or shoot the right people. Sorry, I'll drop the bit.
No, you know what? If you want to continue spouting podcast radicalization, you do that. And you get to listen to yourself when you edit this podcast.
That's true, I do.
And that's a great moment for you to self-reflect, Isaac.
Okay, I'm self-reflecting. I'm self-reflecting. Is there anything in here at all? I think it's funny. Anyway.
The problem is that it's only funny if we're sure you don't mean it.
Of course I don't mean it. But I've planted the seeds of doubt now.
Anyway, yes, it's Rajiv is just one missed opportunity after another. And though the best thing possibly that I got from reading the author's note is that apparently the creepy robot theme park is a real place.
Oh yeah, that I know. It's I appreciated the thing you say. The author's from Minneapolis. I've been to Minneapolis a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
actually, I think technically the author's from St. Paul, but
from St. Paul. But yeah, no, it seemed down to the sort of the trying to refab giant crumbling, mansions thing. All the sort of the local references seemed very spot on, and well, and I could see where I could see the author looking at this X and thinking, why it's this could be like a supervillain's lair. You could have people squatting in there, and the homeowners would never realize it. It's so big, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that was fine as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think part of the problem here is that supervillains. I mean, this is ironic because this is wizards versus lesbians, but the classic supervillain doesn't really work, at least not for me. The just wants to see everything burn, because we have people like that in the real world, and they're mostly just real dumb. And so it's hard for me to believe that these people could pose a credible threat unless, because even if when they have millions or billions of dollars, they're usually too caught up in their own egos to wreak a lot of havoc unless they somehow manage to get elected to public office.
I mean, to me, as I mentioned Thanos before, but I keep coming back to Thanos, whose motivation in the original Marvel comics was that he was in love with the anthropomorphic personification of death, who was a skeleton with titties under her robe.
That's honestly a better motivation. Not that I've seen the movies, but I feel like that's a better motivation than attempting to solve the population bomb.
Yes, exactly. And that's the point, is that in the movies they make him into this sort of cartoon radical who sees that that we're on the brink of the ecological catastrophe and decides that mass murder is the only possible solution to it. And this sort of is a tradition that draws back to the Red Scare and, via that all the way back to any other thing, up to and including the Yellow Peril. But like the idea that anybody who thinks that, drastic action may need to be taken to, maybe circumvent some of the destruction that capital is wreaking on the planet, is a gibbering madman mass murderer. Now the fact that many of them have been gibbering mass murderers,
honestly, the Earth is overpopulated and something must be done about it. Like that entire ideology is steeped in eugenics and racism. And scaremongering. So, like, I don't actually object to a villain being steeped in that ideology. It's just they're making it that incompetent. Actually, like, takes away from the things that make that ideology actually scary, which is, eugenics and it's trying to, sterilize undesirables and things like that.
I'm apparently still mad about the ending of Avengers Endgame, even though it came out like 5 years ago or something. And I resent that I have to side with Disney against Ron DeSantis, which is just humiliating for everyone involved. Yes, I think that we underserve, like, by making people like this into cartoon villains, we both overprivilege their ideas and distract from where people with ideas like that can actually cause damage.
Yes. And I think
because people with ideas like that who are actually causing damage are people who are making policies that indiscriminately murder poor people.
Right.
They're the people who took away the disability benefit in the UK over the course of the pandemic and murdered thousands of people without ever facing any kind of justice or backlash for it.
Or the people who are, pushing in national health systems, the ones who are pushing like a really pro-euthanization of disabled people, even for just things like being mildly depressed.
Yes. People like that. It doesn't look like this is what I'm saying.
Yes. No, and this is why, like, the entire plot line with Rajiv is a real failure and is a real disappointment after the much more plausible scary villain of the previous book.
Exactly, because one dude who is so high on his own fart gas that he thinks that he deserves to be dictator is a tale as old as time. And sometimes they succeed, so
sometimes they succeed, but usually they succeed, via institutional methods and or like actually being a charismatic leader as opposed to through social media manipulation, which really works better if, you are in fact a think tank or a foreign power. Yes.
Although we must not discount the raw personal charisma of Vladimir Putin.
I mean, no, I know that's a joke, but on the other hand, you read some of those op-eds and you gotta wonder.
This book isn't actually that bad. Here's why.
But okay, so let's pivot away from all the ways that politically this book is disappointment. And let's actually go to the things that we did like, which are the human interactions, like the 2 generations of awful mothering, which I found to be actually really well depicted and hilarious.
Yes, I did enjoy that. I liked the way that the grandmother kept aggressively threatening to take everybody out to lunch.
Yes.
Because that is a grandmother's favorite way of imposing her will on people, is feeding them.
Yes, and the thing of the fact that her daughter was kidnapped, tortured, and then had to spend over a decade on the run. And she
and
clearly
Mimi's major reaction to this is hurt feelings.
She's so hurt. You couldn't have just called a few more times from an untraceable payphone.
Yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed that. Although making Grandma the superhero after that kind of made it a little bit strange.
Yeah, though, I mean, the thing is that was definitely giving a little bit too much narrative love to, an awful parent. But at the same time, the thing is that both Steph's mother and her grandmother are remarkably talented women. They're just awful parents.
True.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and I actually think, wow, this woman is really cool. It's too bad that I'm trapped in, this horrible emotional manipulation war with her is actually a totally real and legitimate thing to depict. And I thought that this depicted it fairly well.
I agree. 100% agree.
And
I just want to say that even though I've spent the last half hour complaining about everything about this book that disappointed me, it would not have had the opportunity to disappoint me if it did not lay out so many cool things,
Yeah.
and then fail to deliver on most of them.
Yeah. And I think that a big difference in our take on the book is actually just how mad we are at that last quarter to third.
Yeah, I'm not even bad. I just I was like, I was rooting for it to pull out.
Yeah.
Or to pull up, and it didn't. That's all.
It's yeah, and I feel like you're right that Nell could have been developed a lot better, and Glennis at all. But I did think the scenes where Nell is actually calling her dad and his girlfriends on, they're like, don't worry, we won't, let them take you away. And she's like, oh, really? Have you done anything in my life to indicate that I should believe you?
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case. Actually, I think my favorite, let's see, I wrote a specific note about it here because I liked it that much. Oh, yes. Don't worry, daughter. I haven't talked to in 10 years. The polycule is behind you every step of the way.
Exactly.
Which was treated with the appropriate amount of, well, bless their hearts, but come on now.
I'm not even sure there's a bless their hearts in there, honestly.
I mean, they were portrayed as nice and well-meaning, if ineffectual.
I think
people.
Well, the girlfriends were portrayed as nice and well-meaning, if ineffectual.
Oh, yeah.
The dad...
But that's because they're girls. Men don't really get
to be fair, they're also not her parent. And, it's if the guy that you're dating or the guy that's your metamor is yes, it's really sad. I lost my daughter in a horrible custody battle with her evangelical wife. Maybe you press him on that. Maybe you're like, but did you really get a good enough lawyer? Did you really, push the custody angle harder? Or maybe you go, wow, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, no, I mean, I personally can see just be like, well, we're just going to close the book on that and be terrified that eventually we'll have to deal with it.
Right. And then she comes up and, you can see them sort of
mentally readjust to the reality of
and
having
slowly
to,
realizing that, that they actually, even though this is not their daughter, they're actually going to have to parent because, among other things, their husband / metamor is kind of terrible at parenting, and the girl's mother is, an abusive cultist, and so somebody is going to have to step in, and they're not competent at it, but they're actually the only people in Nell's life who seem to be willing to take any action whatsoever, even if it's just driving her to the DMV.
Yes, once again, they're decent people, and yeah, no, I really liked that. Yeah. I liked the way that household was that messy,
right?
And
the fights over doing the dishes.
Yeah, no, this is it makes sense for there to be fuel for Nell's suspicion of them,
right? And it's not just about Christian prudishness.
Exactly. I almost think that Oh well, I think that she could probably have afforded to be a little bit more resentful and unfair to them than she was actually, without even the assistance of the mischief elves.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like she wasn't more resentful of them because, when you've got, a terrible parent and a crappy parent, you kind of have to side with the crappy parent because that's the best option. And when you have, your terrible parent and your crappy parent and your well-meaning but ineffectual step-parents, well, maybe you side with the well-meaning, but, maybe you just, find a way to like them because you need somebody in your life who's going to be a useful adult. And especially in a crisis when, your girlfriend's life is on the line.
Yeah, that does help, But it's like Nell wasn't even certain that her mom was a bad parent up until, the pretty uncontrovertible evidence that she had abandoned her and then kidnapped her girlfriend and locked her in a shed.
Right, but it's when she starts getting serious about finding Glennis and starting to realize that, the environment that she and Glennis came out of is not tenable at all, and not something that they can ever really return to. That's when she starts making overtures to the polycule.
Yes, it's very practical. Nell is,
right.
if nothing else, and that actually does work very well with her, prepper.
She's a prepper who also has kind of had to parent her mom because
right. So she has that level of precocious competence going on, even if she's afraid to ride a bus, and which makes perfect sense given where she's coming from.
Yeah.
So that part excellent.
And
that's the thing
right.
The reason that I'm coming at this with so much frustration is that this author is capable of making these really excellent, nuanced observations about certain people and dynamics.
Yeah.
And then the books end up being about not that.
Right. Right. And part of it's just that she's real good at character moments, and she's also real good at a tense scene, but she's not actually very good at plotting.
Yeah.
And so, but again, another good scene, Nell passive aggressively doing the dishes.
Good stuff. Who among us has not passive aggressively done the dishes?
Exactly. And so that's, this is a lot of missed opportunities. But the character moments were really good. And the thing that for me, the big disappointment really was just that you had these good, scary, tense scenes. And then the whole thing with going to be a hostage to force her mom to do the coding just did not work.
No, it didn't
at all. And didn't work with anything that we've learned about these characters. There's absolutely no way that her mother would have agreed to that.
No, I about halfway through the book, I wrote down Steph got the idiot ball, and that's sort of if you know TV tropes, it's this is the phrase for when characters act in dumb or out of character ways to make the plot go along, and unfortunately that happens multiple times in this book. I think that I don't understand how the raid on the compound wasn't the climax. Surely
that was the most tense and scary scene in the book, and also, even having the AI playing things against each other. Once the raid on the compound happens, everything sort of feels downhill after that. Because the entire goal of the book up till then is to rescue Glennis. And they rescue Glennis, and you've still got a big chunk of book left, and nobody's sure what to do with Glennis. She doesn't do anything.
So we keep her off screen for most of the rest of the book.
Right, which is just really frustrating, because you spend half the book, thinking about how important this girl is and how much you want her to be safe and with her girlfriend. And then she shows up, and there's nothing, the narrative doesn't have anything to do with her.
Yeah. 100%. So I think that if I'm, and this is impossible, of course, but what I would love to see from this author is and this is exactly what I said at the end of the last series, but I think even more so now, is to, remove all of this AI stuff and just a novel about, Midwestern teens growing up with, or wherever teens growing up with crappy parents and trying to figure out those dynamics, like, because that's what she excels at.
And honestly, she could even put it in a science fiction setting. Just have just have the plot arcs not center on the AI stuff.
Or even in a sci-fi setting that's sufficiently removed from the now that I don't keep getting hung up on the stuff that doesn't actually work for a near future setting, Mm-hmm. And that might be my problem, but
yeah, because I mean, part of it is also that like a lot of the near future setting stuff is stuff that's very much in like a lot of science fiction zeitgeist stuff, like the drones and the AI stuff and the flash mobs. I feel like this is all in a lot of science fiction that I have read and declined to put on this podcast because it was too annoying. And so stepping away from that, or just even if you want to keep that, sidelining it into being set dressing.
Yes, that would have been fine,
So,
and like to the extent of it, it's like it felt even more shoehorned in than the climax of the last one that the AIs are involved, in the climax of the book.
Yeah.
Like I think the drones bringing her some rope is probably pretty much sums it up. That's your
and the thing
that's
is,
your SF beat,
right? Well, and honestly, like I would totally read a book, even by this author, even in this setting where the AIs are just like helpful side characters, and thus allowing the teens to have adventures that like actual teens probably couldn't get up to because they don't have somebody bringing them drone ropes and like cute robot dog assistants. But I want the focus to be on the human stuff and have the robots be mostly there to move the plot along as opposed to be the point of the plot.
She should just write the Fast Girls Detective Agency books. Because, like, I think that she'd be great at that. Just sort of have it be like, this is really, adventure story for girls, like heightened, a little bit silly. So we don't necessarily have to contend with, stuff that has global stakes, which again was the problem with the first book, that we got to global stakes.
Right.
So that's the problem when you put continuity into something that was a slice of life before that, is you end up with these global stakes.
But the thing is, you don't have to. This is my plea to the authors of the world, is you actually are allowed to keep the stakes personal, even across multiple volumes of your series. You can have continuity and the stakes can continue to be personal and local.
I'm making the pray hands emoji over here.
So.
I would very much love for that to be true, or for that to be more common.
Yeah.
Because man, I cared more about Nell in this book than I cared about like humanity.
Right.
And I think that's true for most books, right? Like that's the reason why we go to these things.
Right, exactly. And so, that is the thing, is that I think authors raise the stakes to, be the fate of the world is in the balance, but it does not matter, because what we ever actually care about is this character going to be okay? Are they going to kiss? Is the dog going to, be safe? Like that's the stuff that we care about no matter what the stakes are. So maybe just lean more into those stakes and less into, tearing the city apart with riots. Even like, and again though, the thing is that it was working for, the stuff with like the dad in the previous book was genuinely scary. And
yes.
The stuff with there's these two groups and they're doing stuff that first of all seems like it's just silly flash mob stuff and is slowly starting to look like, terrorism. And they're like,
that was great.
That was great.
I felt like the real sense of creeping dread.
Right.
As, oh God, how many of the people who are watching me are being, are being ordered to by this app,
Right, exactly. And so it was just the problem, and I guess both of these cases that the book keeps going, and it does, like the books keep going, and the things that after it's resolved, or they keep going past the stuff that's actually scary and into now all of the robots of Camberville are closing in on this house.
Yes. So I'm kind of sorry that I spent most of this episode complaining about what is a better than average and inoffensive piece of YA. It's just like
I understand the things that could be great and then end up not a glorious mess, but just like thoroughly mediocre because they focused on the wrong things. I definitely get the frustration there.
It just gets me.
I know.
Yeah, it seemed it. Yeah. But we must draw this episode to a close at this point, yes. I think.
Well, next time we have a book that was never going to be great, despite the title.
All right. I'm looking forward to this, I guess.
It's short, at least.
I gotta love that. So, yes, Sappho's Bar and Grill next time, which I am told is a turf novel. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Turf novel may be a bit of a stretch, but really more so for the novel part than for the turf part.